Hello and welcome to TCBTC, TechCrunch's premier and only Bitcoin podcast. I am Alex Wilhelm, one half of your hosting team. John Biggs is off today, but we have a special treat. We are here at NSF in the studio, and we are joined by one Jason Donald Rowley, the half-Greek Chicago guy.
Yep.
So
sure.
who the hell are you, Jason? Why are you here?
It's an excellent question. Still trying to figure that out myself. I am a
Bitcoin kid.
Bitcoin kid, sure.
And
do
so-
a lot of other stuff, but yeah, Bitcoin's a big interest of
for
mine.
5, 6, 7 years now, and you got me onto Bitcoin, I want to say about 2 years ago.
Yeah, a few years ago, we almost built a mining rig together.
That's true. I mean, by the way, it was a Litecoin mining rig, and I'm very glad we
Yes.
didn't drop like the 5K into that, because Litecoin, as you well know,
got really difficult to mine.
it got REKT, if you will, it got wrecked.
Sure.
Yes.
If you will.
But you're here, you're in town, you're working down South Bay, and most importantly, me and you had a meeting, if you will, with, let's say, a major Chinese Bitcoin mining guy.
Sure.
And we sat and talked to him, and he controls, this person, individual, controls, how much of the total hash rate was it?
So I think that this fellow, just his own machines control about, or account for about 10-ish% of the total hash power on the Bitcoin network.
So basically, of the all compute inputs to Bitcoin on the mining and transaction side, he controls 1/10 of that.
Right, but
globally.
I mean, yes.
Okay.
But he does have a lot more going for him than that.
Okay. But still, though, in terms of the player space, he is one of the chief Bitcoin guys. Period.
Sure.
So he's extracting Bitcoin by the bucket each day from his mining operation. Is this a global thing? Is it based in China only? What's the geographic split we're looking at?
So based on what I understand, I think that the majority of his hash power is centered in China or Mongolia, where there's a lot of hydroelectric power.
So low-cost power, low-carbon power.
That's going to be the arbiter of where miners locate their machines.
Sure.
I know that he was recently involved in the acquisition of a large Bitcoin mining operation here in California.
Okay.
But
He's a multifaceted player, if you will.
Yep.
And we met with him down, let's just say, at a VC office.
Sure.
Keep it generic.
Sure.
And we discussed a number of things, but most importantly, given the news of the last couple of weeks, was block size.
Yeah.
And when we met with him, it was still, I think, a little bit less certain what was going to happen. Certainly now with Bitcoin XT and with the 8 megabyte block size, things have solidified a little bit.
Yep.
So I'm trying to let you tell this, because it's more yours than mine. So what did he tell us about how the 8 megabyte cap was selected?
Decided.
How did it come to be?
Yeah, so I mean, as you remember, like we met with this guy before the announcement of Bitcoin XT.
Yes.
And he'd mentioned that he is good friends with a number of people that run, some of the largest mining pools in China.
And they stay in touch how?
So he basically controls a WeChat room that accounts for a meaningful chunk of, in fact, close to it is a super majority.
So more than 60% then?
Around 60%
Wait,
of
so he's got just some buddies in a WeChat room that controls basically all of Bitcoin?
Sure. If you want to be blunt about it.
Majority of the Bitcoin hash rate.
Sure,
Okay,
yes.
I'll take that.
Yes.
Okay.
And so, he relays the story to us of how the Chinese make decisions versus how the Americans make decisions, right? And,
Careful on how you phrase that.
so how Chinese Bitcoin miners have decided to, or the way that they want to change the protocol.
How they picked 8 megabytes is essentially the gist.
Sure, effectively yes.
Okay.
So the way that he relayed it, and he may have been joking, I do not know. He said that 8 is a very lucky number in China, which it is, and so thus came the 8 megabyte block size.
But how did they actually come to a quorum or a consensus? That's what I'm really trying to get at.
Sure.
Because that's the funniest part of the story. Because we've been talking about this on Reddit with everyone else for so long.
Yes. So basically, the long and short of it is they got together for a barbecue.
Yes.
And the goal was nobody's leaving the barbecue until a decision is made on block size, whether or not it's going to be maintained at 1 megabyte or whether it's going to be increased to X number of megabytes.
2, 3, 8, 15, 20,
whatever it was going to be.
Yeah.
And
So they were kept hostage, essentially. But
They were very well-fed hostages.
But I mean, it's like if I was like, you can't leave my house until you decide whether or not to jump off the building. And you'd be like, oh no. But really, they sat down and solved this in an afternoon, it sounds like.
Sure.
As opposed to the general process we've seen across Bitcoin in general, which
Where
is more...
there's very bureaucratic, there's a lot of, hemming and hawing around.
Nerds. Just go back and forth like, I'm going to delete your MySpace. It's like, Why could they reach consensus so quickly? Was it technologically not difficult? Was it not controversial? What led, do you think, to that kind of quick conclusion?
I think like they have a much more Spartan way of making decisions, which is they understand that they control a supermajority of the blockchain, and that at least in theory they have the ability to make a change and push a change forward.
So we're talking about a supermajority here. So enough to actually change the Bitcoin, to fork it essentially.
Sure.
If you want to. And then Bitcoin XT came out, and there has been a rising agreement among different mining pools, Antpool, for example, that Bitcoin XT and the way that it wants to approach this is the way forward, but it has not reached anything close to a majority yet.
Right.
So I'm curious if the Chinese mining community has decided and Bitcoin XT agrees with their general push, why aren't we seeing this move more quickly?
Actually, it's a really excellent question.
Thank you, I'm really smart.
Yeah, so the truth is that, your guess is as good as mine, because in theory, if you have all these folks in a WeChat room together, and they all get together for a barbecue, and they say, hey, we're all going to support.
Were they barbecuing? Like, were they, like, I really want to imagine this like setting, like food's out, everyone's hanging out.
Sure.
They're like 7 megabytes, 9, 8, sold 8. Like.
Yeah, I mean, like again, I don't really know like why there hasn't been so much such a much faster move toward the 8 megabyte block size, because even some of the largest pools like Huobi and a few others have basically said, no, we're not going to support Bitcoin XT.
But I mean, is that like what, 20% of the hash power out there?
So yeah, I mean, like based on what I read a day or two ago, and I probably should have come with much more current. Whatever.
That's close enough.
So based on what I read a couple of days ago, there's approximately 25% of the Bitcoin network supporting this new
Bitcoin XT.
This new Bitcoin XT proposal.
Is that a number that you find to be high for how long it's been out, or low for how long it's been out? What's your gut take on the growth of that percentage so far?
Yeah. So I mean, if we wanted to tell the story like this and say like, oh, there's this cartel of miners from all the rest.
Friendly cartel.
Friendly cartel.
Pirates of the Caribbean cartel.
It's the barbecuing cartel, right?
The Tortuga cartels.
Whatever. Anyways, so if we wanted to tell the story of secretive cartel of Chinese Bitcoin miners, collude to change the block size to 8 megabytes and do all this other stuff, right? We would have expected to see all of a sudden 70% or 80% of the blockchain switching over to support
but to be clear,
this new block
supporting
size.
an 8 megabyte block limit size in theory is different than supporting Bitcoin XT in practice, right? There is actual differentiation there. They're not the same thing entirely.
Well, so like Bitcoin XT is its own its own sort of entity, if you will.
It's adjacent to Bitcoin. It is a fork from it.
Yeah, it's a fork of Bitcoin that has been it's sort of like a hard fork of Bitcoin rather than the
soft fork of updates, if you will.
Yeah, the way that things have usually been done. Now, granted, there is a history of this supermajority requirement for new changes to the protocol to take effect.
It's just like amending the Constitution. You have to have 2/3 of both houses.
Well, it's actually been
hard to do.
and they came back to the 75%-ish number, from a previous improvement to the Bitcoin protocol, which I think was BIP 34. But
yes, well, 33 was the better vintage in my view.
Don't quote me on that, guys.
BIP 34 some great Cabernets that year. Before we let you go, we still have you here. I'm very curious about your take on the current lack of Bitcoin price swings. We saw Bitcoin go up to about 310 during the height of the Greek, we'll call it uncertainty.
Sure.
And we've seen Bitcoin slowly deflate since then, even as the global markets have gyrated, commodities have gotten wrecked and so forth.
Yep.
It's been a really turmoil time, but Bitcoin's now down to about 230, 235,
Yep.
and has been kind of in a slow deflationary decline for some time. I'm surprised by that. I thought it would actually do better as the global economy fell apart, as people look for a different hedge, if you will.
Sure.
But we haven't seen that. So quickly, why?
I think there's still a lot of, it's the same stuff that's plagued Bitcoin for the past, couple of years. It's, continual regulatory uncertainty, a lack of, broader consumer adoption. And in the case of, what's just been happening most recently with, the Chinese, economic stuff and all the rest. And
the quote, Chinese.
Yeah, the great conflagration of China.
What does this motion mean?
It's like the upwelling of hot air from like a fire, right? So, anyways, so as the Chinese economy has suffered.
Now we're doing this. The sparks going back into the fire. Like what? Is there like a chimney effect going on with your hand motions? I can't quite decide.
Damn it, Wilhelm! I will gesticulate if I want to. So. I think like with what's been going on with China, there's just been, again, if there was a lot of regulatory uncertainty before, there is a lot of regulatory uncertainty now.
Okay.
Because there's just, nobody really knows what the Chinese are going to do with their own economic policy and whether or not this large, contingent of the economy, computing and
so the strengths are still strong, the weaknesses are still weak, and we haven't really broken out of the equilibrium.
Yeah, there hasn't, like at least in my reading of it, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are gonna disagree with me.
Yeah.
There's been a real like dearth of unbelievably good news that would that would break Bitcoin's price trends out of its sort of downward trend.
Right.
Trend line.
The last question then, to the moon, or to $200 a coin?
Well, I mean, we're fairly close to $200 a coin.
I'm putting you on the spot here.
Over what period of time?
The next 3 months.
Next 3 months, define moon.
Let's say over 500 or under 200.
Oh man.
And if you're wrong, people are going to laugh at you because you're.
I know. I would, if you had, if I
gun
had
to your head. Come on, come on,
if I had to put everything on it, I would say that we would be looking at slightly higher than we are today. Slightly.
All right. Well, we'll see. And if you're wrong, we'll jack you back and make fun of you.
That's totally fine.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
Anytime.